Sir, you're under arrest. Hands behind your back, now.
The hotel keycard fell from Jenna's jeans pocket like a confession written in plastic. I stood there in our cramped bedroom, holding it between my fingers, feeling the weight of 20 years of marriage crumble into dust. Mason Burke. That's me. 38 years old, former steel mill engineer, now maintenance supervisor at Hartwell Industrial after the merger gutted half our workforce. I should have seen this coming. Hell, maybe I did see it coming and just chose to ignore the signs like a fool. "What's this?" I asked when Jenna walked into the bedroom, her hair still damp from her shower. She glanced at the keycard and didn't even flinch. "Work conference last weekend. Must have forgotten to throw it away. Hampton Inn, 20 miles from here." "What kind of work conference needs a hotel room that close to home?" "The kind where I had to entertain clients until midnight," she said, brushing past me to grab her earrings from the dresser. "You wouldn't understand. Your idea of client entertainment is buying someone a beer at Murphy's Tavern." That stung because it was true. I'd never been good with people the way Jenna was. She worked HR at Lennox Solutions, a private contractor that handled logistics for the defense industry. Big money, corporate culture, everything I'd never been part of, everything she seemed to want more of lately. "Which clients?" I pressed. She turned around, and for the first time in months, I saw real anger in her eyes instead of the usual indifference. "Jesus Christ, Mason! Are you seriously going to interrogate me over a hotel keycard? I work my butt off to keep us afloat while you tinker with broken machinery for $12 an hour. $16.50, I corrected automatically. "Oh, excuse me, $16.50. "That changes everything." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm going to be late." Some of us have actual careers to worry about. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with the key card and a growing certainty that my wife was lying to me. I'd always been good with details, came with the engineering background. Patterns, inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. And lately, nothing about Jenna added up. The overnight trips had started 3 months ago, always work-related, always urgent, always requiring her to stay at hotels instead of driving home. She'd come back energized in a way I hadn't seen in years, talking about promotions and opportunities and regional director positions that might open up. Meanwhile, I'd been passed over for the plant supervisor role again last week. 20 years of experience, and they gave it to some kid with an MBA who'd never held a wrench in his life. Jenna had celebrated her own raise that same night, popping open a bottle of wine and talking about how we were finally moving up in the world. I should have been happy for her. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I followed her. Jenna said she was working late on quarterly reports, but her car wasn't in the Lennox Solutions parking lot. It was at the Hampton Inn, same as the keycard. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, telling myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be an explanation. Then I saw her walk out of the lobby with a man I recognized from the company Christmas party. Colby Lennox, regional director, the boss's son. 42 years old, divorced, drove a BMW that cost more than I made in 2 years. They weren't discussing quarterly reports. I watched him kiss my wife in the parking lot, his hands on her waist, her fingers tangled in his hair. 20 years of marriage and she'd never kissed me like that, not even on our wedding day. The rage hit me like a punch to the gut, not the hot, explosive kind you see in movies. This was cold and calculating, settling into my bones like winter frost. I sat there watching them, memorizing every detail, planning what came next. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I drove home and waited. Monday morning, I put on my best shirt, the one Jenna bought me for job interviews I never got, and drove to Lennox Solutions. The building was all glass and steel, designed to impress clients with money to burn. I'd only been there twice before. The Christmas party and the day Jenna got promoted to senior HR specialist. The security guard at the front desk knew me. "Hey, Mason, here to see Jenna?" "Actually, I need to speak with Colby Lennox. It's about a contracting opportunity." He picked up the phone and made the call. 2 minutes later, I was riding the elevator to the executive floor, my hands steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. Colby's office took up a corner of the building, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He was behind his desk when I walked in, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He looked up with the kind of smile politicians use when they're lying. "Mason, right? Jenna's husband. What can I do for you?" I closed the door behind me and walked across the room, noting how his confidence wavered as I got closer. He was taller than me, better dressed, richer, more educated. But I'd spent 20 years working with my hands, and my hands were hard. "You can explain why you were kissing my wife in a hotel parking lot," I said. His face went pale, then red. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." I hit him. Not a calculated punch, not a strategic strike, just raw fury compressed into my fist, connecting with his jaw hard enough to send him tumbling over his chair. His coffee mug shattered against the wall, leaving a brown stain on the expensive paint. Through the glass wall of his office, I could see people stopping their conversations, phones coming out to record what was happening. Colby was on the floor, blood trickling from his mouth, looking up at me with something between fear and outrage. "You crazy son of a witch," he said, struggling to his feet. "I'll have you arrested." "Go ahead. Tell everyone why." Security arrived before he could respond. 2 guards, both bigger than me, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I knew one of them, Chuck. We'd gone to high school together before his family moved away. "Come on, Mason," Chuck said. "Let's do this easy." I could have gone easy, should have gone easy. But 20 years of swallowing disappointment and watching other people get what I'd worked for had left me with nothing to lose. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. Chuck went down when I caught him with an elbow to the solar plexus. The other guard, some kid who looked like he'd learned his moves from YouTube, hesitated long enough for me to grab a paperweight from Colby's desk and threaten to use it. By then, half the office was watching through the glass walls, phones recording everything. I could see Jenna pushing through the crowd, her face white with shock and embarrassment. "Mason, stop!" she screamed. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 20 years, looked at me like I was something disgusting she'd scraped off her shoe. "Too late for that," I said. More security arrived. Real security this time, not rent-a-cops. I let them cuff me without resistance, walked out through the lobby with my head up while dozens of employees stared and whispered. Someone had already posted video of the fight online. By the time I made bail 6 hours later, it had been viewed 50,000 times. I was fired from Hartwell Industrial that afternoon. Terminated for conduct unbecoming and bringing negative attention to the company. 20 years of service, and they couldn't get rid of me fast enough. Jenna was waiting when I got home, her bags packed, her face set in stone. "I'm staying at my sister's," she said. "Don't try to contact me." "So that's it? 20 years and you're just walking away? You embarrassed me in front of my entire company. You assaulted my boss. What did you think would happen?" "I thought you might apologize for cheating on me." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Cheating? Is that what you call it when someone finally appreciates what I have to offer?" "What you have to offer? You mean sleeping with the boss's son?" "I mean ambition. Drive. Things you gave up a long time ago." She picked up her suitcase. "Colby sees potential in me. He believes in me." "When's the last time you did that?" I wanted to argue, to point out all the times I'd supported her career while mine stagnated. But looking at her face, I realized she genuinely believed what she was saying. In her mind, I was the villain of this story. "Have a nice life," I said. After she left, I sat in our empty house and waited for the pain to hit. It never came. Instead, I felt something colder settling into the space where my marriage used to be. Purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You don't deserve what she said about you. Check your email. Drew." Drew Patterson, Jenna's friend from work, one of the few coworkers who'd always been decent to me at company functions. I opened my laptop and found the email she'd sent, a video file with no subject line. The video was from an office security camera showing Jenna and 3 other women in what looked like a break room. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. I could read lips well enough to catch the gist of the conversation. "Mason's just a placeholder until I can trade up," Jenna was saying, laughing as she gestured with her coffee cup. 20 years of dead weight. "At least Colby knows how to treat a woman." One of the other women said something I couldn't make out, and Jenna laughed again. "Please! Mason thinks changing the oil in his truck counts as mechanical expertise. Colby's offering me a regional position, real money, real respect. Mason can keep his little maintenance job and find someone who's impressed by $16 an hour." The women laughed. My wife laughed. 20 years reduced to a punchline in a corporate break room. I watched the video 3 times, memorizing every word, every gesture, every cruel smile. Then I closed the laptop and started planning. The next morning, I drove to Raleigh's auto salvage on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, 20 acres of rusted cars and industrial scrap surrounded by chain-link fence, but it was exactly what I needed. Silas Raleigh was my brother, though we hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since he got out of Millfield Correctional, and I made it clear I didn't want his criminal record affecting my security clearance at the mill. Family loyalty versus professional necessity. I'd chosen wrong. I found him under the hood of a '98 Camaro, his arms black with grease up to the elbows. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, and his face went through several expressions before settling on a cautious welcome. "Well, crap," he said. "Mason Burke. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need your help." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Now you need my help. Not when I was sleeping in my car after getting out of prison. Not when I was trying to get this place off the ground with no credit and no references. But now you need something." "You're right. I was wrong." "I'm sorry." The apology caught him off guard. Silas had always been the emotional one, quick to anger and quicker to forgive. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded toward the office trailer. "Coffee's terrible, but it's hot. Come on." The trailer was a mess of paperwork, car parts, and empty beer bottles. Silas poured 2 cups of coffee that looked like motor oil and handed me one. "So what kind of help are we talking about?" I told him everything. The affair, the fight at Lennox Solutions, Jenna's cruel assessment of our marriage. Silas listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Son of a witch," he said when I finished. "And she's staying with Linda?" "For now. Filed for separation yesterday. Wants half of everything, including the house." "What do you want to do about it?" "I want them to understand what they took from me." Silas grinned, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was on my side. "Now you're talking my language. What's the plan?" The plan took shape over the next 3 days. Silas had connections I'd never imagined. People who owed him favors. People who specialized in information gathering. People who could make things happen without leaving fingerprints. 20 years of legitimate work, and I'd never realized how much power existed in the shadows. Drew Patterson turned out to be a goldmine of information. She'd been documenting Colby's harassment and favoritism for months, collecting evidence for a lawsuit she never filed. When Colby fired her for getting pregnant, illegal but hard to prove, she decided revenge was better than legal fees. "He's been sleeping with Jenna for 4 months, she told me during our meeting at a coffee shop downtown, promising her Linda Kowalski's job when Linda retires next year. Regional director, 150,000 base salary plus bonuses. And Jenna believes him? Jenna wants to believe him. There's a difference." Drew slid a flash drive across the table. Hotel receipts, expense reports he filed for their business dinners, text messages from his company phone. "Everything you need to prove the affair." "Why are you helping me?" "Because Colby Lennox is a predator who uses his position to manipulate women, and your wife is just arrogant enough to think she's different." Drew's expression hardened. "Plus, I heard what she said about you in that break room video. You deserve better." The flash drive contained enough evidence to destroy both their careers, but that wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness I'd felt watching my life fall apart. The same humiliation I'd experienced when 50,000 strangers watched me lose control in a corporate lobby. Silas introduced me to Tommy Kowalski, Linda's nephew, who worked IT security for several local companies. For $500 cash, Tommy showed me how to clone phone signals, intercept emails, and track GPS locations without sophisticated equipment. "It's not hacking," he explained, as we sat in his basement surrounded by computer equipment. "It's social engineering. People are lazy with passwords. They leave devices unlocked. They overshare on social media. You just have to know where to look." Within a week, I had access to both Jenna's and Colby's digital lives. Email accounts, social media profiles, credit card statements, calendar appointments, every secret thought, every private conversation, every intimate detail of their affair. Reading their messages was like drinking poison. The things they said about me, about our marriage, about my failure as a husband and provider. Colby called me the maintenance boy in one text. Jenna described our bed life as duty-based at best. They laughed about how long it had taken me to figure out what was happening. But knowledge was power, and power was what I'd been lacking. Now I had both. The first move was subtle. Colby drove a BMW 750i midnight blue with custom rims and a sound system worth more than most people's cars. He parked it in the executive lot at Lennox Solutions, always taking up 2 spaces to avoid dings and scratches. I knew the car's weaknesses because I'd spent 20 years working on vehicles far more complex than German luxury sedans. The anti-theft system was impressive, but it relied on wireless signals that could be intercepted. The engine management computer was sophisticated, but it followed predictable patterns. On a Tuesday morning, while Colby was in meetings and the parking lot was mostly empty, I spent 15 minutes under his car with tools from Silas's salvage yard. Nothing that would cause an accident. I wasn't trying to kill anyone. Just small adjustments that would lead to expensive, embarrassing breakdowns. The oil drain plug loosened just enough to create a slow leak. The brake fluid reservoir contaminated with a few drops of dish soap that would cause the brakes to feel spongy and unreliable. The air intake sensor disconnected in a way that would trigger the check engine light and limit the car's performance. I was back in my truck watching from across the street when Colby discovered the problem. He'd made it 3 blocks before the engine started smoking. The tow truck arrived 20 minutes later, followed by Colby in an Uber, his face red with frustration. That afternoon, Jenna called me for the first time since leaving. "Did you do something to Colby's car?" "I don't know what you're talking about. His BMW broke down this morning. The mechanic says it looks like sabotage. Maybe he should buy American next time." She hung up without another word, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Good. Let her wonder what else I might be capable of. The next phase targeted their professional lives. Lennox Solutions was hosting their annual Client Appreciation Gala at the Riverside Convention Center, a black tie event where Jenna was scheduled to give a presentation on HR innovations. She'd been preparing for weeks, seeing it as her chance to impress the regional executives who would decide her promotion. Tommy had helped me understand the convention center's systems during a reconnaissance visit the week before. The building was old, retrofitted with modern technology that didn't always integrate smoothly. The fire suppression system, in particular, was sensitive to electromagnetic interference. I arrived at the convention center 2 hours before the event, dressed in the coveralls and badge Tommy had provided. Security guards didn't question maintenance workers who looked like they belonged. The electrical room was in the basement, secured with a lock I'd learned to pick during my brief teenage delinquent phase. Inside, I found the main control panel for the building's automated systems. 20 minutes of careful work with a signal generator, and I had what I needed. The gala was in full swing when I triggered the sequence. First, the lights flickered, subtle enough to seem like an electrical glitch. Then the sound system cut out for 30 seconds during Jenna's introduction. Finally, as she began her presentation about creating synergistic workplace environments, the sprinkler systems activated throughout the main ballroom. Chaos. 300 people in formal wear scrambling for exits while water rained down on expensive suits and designer dresses. Jenna's presentation materials destroyed, her hair plastered to her head, her carefully planned career moment reduced to a social media catastrophe. I watched from the parking lot as emergency vehicles arrived and guests filed out of the building, many of them recording video on their phones. By morning, the #LennoxGalaFail hashtag was trending locally, and Jenna's soggy presentation had been turned into a dozen memes. She didn't call to accuse me this time, she knew. Drew's insider access to Lennox Solutions proved invaluable for the next phase. The company used an internal email system that archived all messages and made them searchable by authorized personnel. HR had broad access as part of their compliance responsibilities, and Drew still had her login credentials. "They haven't revoked my access yet," she explained during our meeting at Silas's salvage yard. "Typical corporate incompetence. I can pull any employee's email history going back 5 years. I need everything between Jenna and Colby, personal and professional. That's going to be a lot of material. I'm not in a hurry." She was right about the volume. 5 months of affair documentation filled 3 flash drives, hotel reservations made on company accounts, expense reports for romantic dinners disguised as client meetings, explicit text messages sent through the corporate system, photos they'd shared during business trips that had nothing to do with business. But the real treasure was deeper in the archive. Colby had a history of inappropriate relationships with female employees, going back to his first month as regional director. 3 women had filed informal complaints that were quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements and generous severance packages. 2 others had been transferred to different departments after rejecting his advances. Jenna knew about some of it. Her emails showed her dismissing the other women as jealous and unprofessional, convinced that her relationship with Colby was different because she was special. I spent 2 weeks organizing the material into a comprehensive dossier, cross-referencing dates and locations, building a timeline that showed the systematic pattern of abuse. Then I began distributing it. The first recipient was Linda Kowalski, the current regional director whose job Jenna expected to inherit. Linda had worked for Lennox Solutions for 15 years, climbing from secretary to executive through competence rather than connections. She didn't respond to my anonymous email, but company records showed her scheduling meetings with senior executives within hours of receiving it. The second recipient was Colby's ex-wife, Patricia. Their divorce had been finalized 2 years earlier with a settlement that included a morality clause. If Colby was found to be conducting extramarital affairs during their marriage, she could sue for additional alimony. The evidence I provided dated his pattern of infidelity to well before their separation. The third recipient was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, along with copies to 3 employment law firms that specialized in sexual harassment cases. Within a week, the dominoes began falling. Linda Kowalski called for a full HR investigation into Colby's conduct. Patricia Lennox filed papers to reopen their divorce settlement. 2 of Colby's previous victims came forward with new allegations now that the NDA protection no longer applied. Jenna found herself in the impossible position of being both a victim and an accomplice. Her emails showed she'd known about Colby's history and chosen to ignore it, which made her complicit in the hostile work environment he'd created. Her own affair violated company policy about relationships between supervisors and subordinates, even though she didn't report directly to him. On a Thursday morning, she was called into Linda's office and asked to resign. The alternative was termination for cause, which would have made her ineligible for severance pay or unemployment benefits. She chose resignation, but the damage was already done. Word of the scandal had spread throughout the industry's tight-knit community. HR specialists in a specialized field like defense contracting all knew each other, and Jenna's reputation was permanently tainted. That evening, she appeared at my door for the first time since moving out. "We need to talk," she said. I let her in, noting how different she looked after 3 weeks of stress. The confident, ambitious woman who'd left me for a better life was gone, replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "I know you're behind this," she said. "The car, the gala, the emails. All of it. I don't know what you're talking about. Stop lying. I'm not stupid, Mason. You're the only one with motive and opportunity." "Opportunity for what? Exposing the truth about your affair? Documenting your boss's pattern of sexual harassment? Which part of this seems unfair to you?" She sat down on the couch we'd bought together 10 years earlier, her hands shaking as she reached for a cigarette. "I made mistakes, okay? But you're destroying my entire career over a relationship that was already ending." "Ending? Colby and it wasn't serious, just something that happened. I was going to break it off after I got the promotion." "So you were using him?" "We were using each other. That's how business works." "And me? What was I in all this?" She took a long drag from her cigarette, looking anywhere but at my face. "You were safe, comfortable, but I want more from life than safe and comfortable." "More like what? A regional director job you were never qualified for? A relationship with a man who's been sexually harassing employees for years? You don't understand what it's like to have ambition." "I understand what it's like to work for 20 years and watch other people get promoted over me because I don't. Play politics. I understand what it's like to come home every day to a wife who thinks I'm a failure. I understand what it's like to discover that the person I loved most in the world considers me a placeholder." She flinched at the reference to the break room video. "That was just talk, girl talk. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word. The only question is whether you're sorry you said it or sorry I found out about it." She stubbed out the cigarette and stood up. "What do you want, Mason? You want me to beg? You want me to grovel and tell you how wonderful you are? Fine, I'm sorry. I made terrible choices and I hurt you and I wish I could take it all back. Is that enough?" "It's a start." "Then what's it going to take to end this?" Because whatever you're planning next, I can't survive it. I'm blacklisted in my industry. Colby won't even take my calls. I'm staying with Linda because I can't afford rent. You've won." I looked at her sitting there, really looked at her, and realized something had changed. Not just in her, in me. The anger that had driven me for weeks was still there, but it was colder now, more focused, and it wasn't satisfied by her surrender. "You haven't seen what losing looks like yet," I said. The apartment complex where Jenna moved after staying with her sister was called Riverside Gardens, though it was neither riverside nor particularly garden-like. Built in the 1970s and renovated just enough to justify higher rents, it catered to young professionals and people in transition. What Jenna didn't know was that I owned the building. It had been part of an investment portfolio I'd inherited from my father: 3 small apartment buildings, a duplex, and a strip mall on the east side of town. The properties barely broke even after maintenance and property taxes, so I'd largely ignored them during our marriage. Jenna handled our finances and never bothered to ask about the rental income that automatically deposited into a separate account. When she signed the lease for apartment 2B, using Linda as a reference since she had no current employment, she was unknowingly becoming my tenant. The lease was legitimate, processed through a property management company that handled the day-to-day operations, but I had access to everything: security deposits, rental applications, credit checks, emergency contact information. I also had keys. Not that I used them immediately. That would have been illegal and stupid. Instead, I gathered intelligence through perfectly legal means: lease agreements that showed her financial situation, utility records that revealed her daily routines, security camera footage from the building's common areas that documented her comings and goings. What I discovered was a woman whose life was falling apart faster than she'd admitted. The severance package from Lennox Solutions was modest: 8 weeks of pay that barely covered her moving expenses and first month's rent. Her credit cards were maxed out from trying to maintain her lifestyle during the affair. Her job search had yielded nothing but rejection letters from companies that had heard about the scandal. She was vulnerable, isolated, perfect for the next phase. The psychological pressure started small. A water leak in her ceiling that required maintenance visits during inconvenient hours. Intermittent problems with the heating system that made her apartment uncomfortably cold. Noise complaints from fictional neighbors that resulted in visits from the property management company. Each incident was individually explainable, the kind of normal apartment problems any tenant might experience. But taken together, they created a pattern of harassment that made Jenna feel like she was losing control of her environment. She complained to the property management company, who were genuinely trying to help. They sent maintenance workers, adjusted rent credits for her inconvenience, and promised to investigate the noise complaints. But the problems persisted because they weren't random building issues. They were carefully orchestrated psychological warfare. The breakthrough came when she called me directly. "I know you own the building," she said without preamble. I was sitting in Silas's office trailer, watching the salvage yard through a dirty window while she fell apart over the phone. "I own several buildings. Which one are you talking about?" "Riverside Gardens, my apartment. The place where I can't get a decent night's sleep because the heat keeps cutting out and water drips through my ceiling every time it rains." "Sounds like you should talk to the property management company." I did talk to them. They think I'm crazy. Everything works perfectly when their maintenance people show up. Maybe you are crazy. Wouldn't be the first time stress affected someone's perception of reality. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to watch your life fall apart while other people make decisions that affect your future. To realize that everything you thought was solid ground was actually quicksand. I get it, okay? You've made your point. I hurt you, and now you're hurting me back. We're even. We're not even close to even." That night, I used my keys for the first time. Not to enter her apartment. That would have been breaking and entering. Instead, I accessed the building's mechanical room and made adjustments to the systems that served her unit specifically. The heating control valve calibrated to provide inconsistent temperature. The water pressure regulator set to cause occasional fluctuations. The electrical panel wired to create power surges that would damage sensitive electronics. When Jenna woke up the next morning, her laptop was dead and her apartment was freezing. She called the property management company, who sent a technician within 2 hours. He found everything in perfect working order and suggested she might want to see a doctor about stress-related health issues. That afternoon, she showed up at the salvage yard. "I want to talk," she said, standing outside the chain-link fence like she was afraid to come closer. Silas looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. "Want me to get rid of her?" "No." "Let her in." She picked her way carefully through the maze of wrecked cars and industrial scrap, her designer clothes looking absurd in the setting. I was working on a transmission from a demolished Chevy, my hands black with grease, when she reached me. "Nice place," she said, looking around at the organized chaos of twisted metal and salvaged parts. "It serves its purpose." "Which is what? Hiding from the real world? Building something. You wouldn't understand the concept." She flinched at the insult but pressed on. "I came to make you an offer. I'm listening. I'll confess everything, publicly. The affair, the lies, the things I said about you. I'll tell everyone that you were a good husband and I was selfish and stupid. I'll give you the divorce on whatever terms you want. Just stop torturing me." "Torture is a strong word. What would you call it?" I set down my wrench and looked at her directly. "Justice." "This isn't justice. This is revenge." "What's the difference?" She didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe she did, but she was too tired to argue. The fight had gone out of her over the past few weeks, replaced by resignation and fear. "What's it going to take?" she asked. "I haven't decided yet." "Mason, please, I can't take much more of this. I haven't slept in days. I can't find work. I can't even trust my own apartment. You've already won." "Have I? Because from where I'm standing, you still think this is about winning and losing. You still think I'm doing this because my feelings got hurt? Then what is it about?" I turned back to the transmission, dismissing her without another word. She stood there for several minutes, waiting for an answer that never came. Finally, she walked back through the salvage yard and drove away. That night, I made the call that would set the final phase in motion. The Hartwell industrial plant had been closed for 6 months, another casualty of corporate consolidation and foreign competition. The building sat empty on the north side of town, surrounded by chain-link fence and no trespassing signs that nobody bothered to enforce. I had keys because I'd been part of the skeleton crew that shut the place down, securing equipment and preparing the facility for eventual demolition. The company had forgotten to ask for the keys back when they fired me, and I'd forgotten to return them. The plant was perfect for what I had in mind: isolated, abandoned, filled with the ghosts of 20 years of my working life. If I was going to end this thing, it needed to happen where it all began. I spent 3 days preparing the space, using equipment from Silas's salvage yard to create what I needed. Industrial cameras positioned to capture multiple angles. Lighting rigs powered by portable generators. A crude but functional live stream setup that would broadcast everything to social media platforms in real time. The message I sent to Jenna and Colby was simple. Settlement meeting tonight at 9 p.m. Hartwell Industrial, main entrance. Come alone and bring whatever evidence you have of my harassment. Time to end this like adults. Colby responded first. "You're insane if you think I'm meeting you anywhere." Jenna's reply came an hour later. "What kind of settlement?" "The kind where you get your lives back," I typed. "But only if you show up." Neither of them believed me, but they couldn't afford not to come. Colby had been suspended from Lennox Solutions pending the outcome of the HR investigation. 3 more women had come forward with harassment allegations, and his position was becoming untenable. He needed this thing resolved before it destroyed what remained of his career. Jenna was in worse shape. 2 months unemployed, living off credit cards, facing the prospect of bankruptcy if she couldn't find work soon. The industry blacklist was real, and her reputation was toxic. She needed closure as much as I did. They arrived separately as instructed. Colby first, driving a rental car since his BMW was still in the shop. He looked nervous as he walked through the abandoned parking lot, constantly checking over his shoulder like he expected an ambush. Jenna came 5 minutes later, her movements cautious but determined. She'd lost weight over the past month, and her clothes hung loose on her frame. The confident executive who'd left me for a better life was gone, replaced by someone who looked haunted. I met them at the main entrance, standing in the pool of light from a single working street lamp. Behind me, the plant loomed in darkness, its broken windows reflecting fragments of light like dead eyes. Both of you made it, I said. Good. What is this, Mason? Jenna asked. What do you want? I want to have a conversation. An honest one. About what happened and why. Colby stepped forward, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. This is harassment. I could have you arrested for stalking. You could try. But first, you'd have to explain to the police why you're here voluntarily, meeting with someone you claim is threatening you. Because you said you'd leave us alone if we came. I said we'd settle this. There's a difference. I turned and walked toward the plant's main entrance, knowing they'd follow. They had no choice. Inside, the factory floor stretched into shadows, empty production lines creating a maze of metal and abandoned machinery. Our footsteps echoed in the vast space. Jesus, Colby muttered. This place is a tomb. 20 years of my life, I said. Gone because men like you decided it was more profitable to build things overseas. That's not my fault, he said. I don't make those decisions. No, you just profit from them. Easy to do when you inherit your position instead of earning it. We reached the area I'd prepared, a clear space near the old supervisor's office, where the lighting was adequate and the cameras had good angles. Neither of them noticed the equipment I'd hidden in the shadows. So what now? Jenna asked. You brought us here to tell us how terrible we are? We already know. Do you? Because from where I've been sitting, you both seem to think you're victims in this story. We made mistakes, Colby said. But what you've done goes way beyond proportional response. You've destroyed our careers, our reputations, our lives. At some point, revenge becomes pathological. Revenge assumes I did something wrong. All I did was expose the truth about who you really are. You sabotaged my car. Prove it. You hacked the sprinkler system at the gala. Prove it. You sent those emails to corporate headquarters, to my ex-wife, to the government. Those emails contain documentation of your own behavior, your own words, your own choices. If that destroyed your career, maybe the problem isn't with the messenger. Jenna stepped between us, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Stop. Both of you, just stop. This isn't accomplishing anything. What would accomplish something? I asked her. I don't know. Forgiveness? Moving on? Getting on with our lives? Easy words from someone who threw away 20 years of marriage for a promotion she was never going to get. You don't know that. Don't I? Colby, tell her about Linda Kowalski's contract. Colby's face went pale. What? Linda's contract. The one that extends her employment for 3 more years, with automatic renewal clauses. The contract that makes it impossible for her position to open up any time in the foreseeable future. Jenna turned to look at Colby, confusion and dawning realization warring on her face. What is he talking about? It's not. That's not how it works. He knew, I continued. He knew there was no regional director position opening up. He knew he was lying to you from the beginning. You weren't trading up, Jenna. You were being used? That's not true, she said, but her voice was small and uncertain. Ask him. Ask him when he was planning to tell you that the job you destroyed our marriage for doesn't exist. Colby stepped backward, putting distance between himself and Jenna's mounting anger. It's complicated. There are always opportunities for the right person. You son of a witch, she whispered. You knew. You knew the whole time. I gave you what you wanted. Excitement, passion, someone who appreciated your ambitions. She slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the empty factory like a gunshot. You gave me lies, just like Mason said. You used me for Zex and threw me away when I became inconvenient. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Explain to me how sleeping with a married subordinate and promising her a job that doesn't exist counts as appreciation. Colby looked around desperately, as if the abandoned machinery might offer him an escape route. Look, maybe I made some promises I couldn't keep. But you were willing, more than willing. You came on to me as much as I came on to you. Because you were my boss. Because you had power over my career and my future. And you used that power to manipulate her, I said. Just like you manipulated the others. Drew, Patricia, the women who filed complaints. It's a pattern with you. I never forced anyone to do anything. You didn't have to. You just made it clear that cooperation would be rewarded and resistance would be punished. That's not seduction, Colby. That's coercion. He straightened up, trying to project the authority he'd once possessed. You're both pathetic. Jenna, you were desperate to escape your dead-end marriage to a glorified janitor. Mason, you were so oblivious to your wife's needs that she had to look elsewhere for fulfillment. I didn't create this situation. I just provided an alternative. An alternative that destroyed everything it touched, I said. That's life. People make choices. Sometimes those choices have consequences. You're right about that. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a tablet computer, its screen already glowing with live stream comments from viewers who'd been watching our conversation in real time. Both Jenna and Colby stared at the device in horror. What is that? Jenna asked. Consequences, I said. Everything we've said tonight has been broadcast live to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. 15,000 viewers and climbing. You recorded us without consent? Colby said. That's illegal. Not in this state. As long as one party to the conversation consents to recording, it's perfectly legal. And I definitely consent. Jenna grabbed for the tablet, but I pulled it away. You can't do this. You can't destroy what's left of our lives for your entertainment. I'm not doing it for entertainment. I'm doing it for accountability. For 20 years, I watched people like Colby get away with things that would have destroyed ordinary people. I watched people like you justify betrayal because it served your ambitions. Tonight, everyone gets to see who you really are when you think nobody's watching. Please, she said. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I heard genuine desperation in her voice. Please don't do this. I'll do anything you want. I'll sign any papers, make any public statement, disappear from your life forever. Just don't humiliate me in front of the entire world. Why not? You humiliated me in front of your coworkers. You humiliated me in front of my employer. You humiliated me in front of 50,000 strangers when that video of our fight went viral. What makes your humiliation more important than mine? Because I'm sorry. Because I know I was wrong. Because I've learned from this. Have you? Or are you just sorry you got caught? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The question hung in the air like smoke. Colby, meanwhile, had been edging toward the exit. I'm not staying for this psychological breakdown. You want to torture each other. Go ahead. But I'm done. He turned to leave, but Silas stepped out of the shadows, blocking his path. My brother looked exactly like what he was, an ex-convict who'd spent 5 years lifting weights in a state prison. Colby stopped walking. Nobody leaves until we're finished, Silas said. This is kidnapping, false imprisonment. You can't. I can do whatever I want. This is private property, and you're here voluntarily. If you want to leave, you're welcome to try. Colby looked at Silas, then at me, then at the tablet still broadcasting our conversation to thousands of viewers. His shoulders sagged as he realized he was trapped. What do you want? He asked. I want you to tell the truth, on camera, about what you did to Jenna, to Drew, to all the other women. I want you to explain how you used your position to manipulate vulnerable employees. And if I do that, then you get to leave. Both of you. And this ends. Jenna looked at me with something that might have been hope. You mean that? If we confess everything, you'll stop? I'll stop actively destroying your lives. What happens after that is up to you. She nodded slowly, then turned to face the hidden cameras. My name is Jenna Burke. For the past 4 months, I've been having an affair with my supervisor, Colby Lennox. I justified it by telling myself that my husband didn't appreciate me, that I deserved better, that I was trapped in a dead-end marriage. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. But the truth is, I was selfish. I was willing to destroy a 20-year marriage for the promise of a promotion that was never real. I said cruel things about my husband to coworkers. I lied to him, manipulated him, and abandoned him when he needed me most. I destroyed the life of a good man because I thought I was entitled to something better. She looked directly at me, tears streaming down her face. Mason, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve better than what I gave you, and I hope someday you can forgive me. I felt something shift inside my chest, a knot of anger loosening for the first time in months. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Colby, however, remained defiant. I'm not apologizing for anything. Jenna was an adult who made her own choices. If she regrets those choices now, that's her problem. Tell them about the other women. I said. What other women? Drew Patterson? Patricia Morrison, Lisa Walsh, the 3 harassment complaints that were settled with NDAs. Tell the viewers how you've been using your position to coerce women into sexual relationships for years. Those were all consensual relationships between adults. Were they? Because Drew's testimony suggests otherwise. She says you made it clear that her employment was contingent on her willingness to sleep with you. Drew Patterson was terminated for cause. She's a disgruntled employee making false accusations. What about Patricia, your ex-wife? She was an employee when you started sleeping with her, too. Colby's face was red with anger and embarrassment. My personal relationships are none of your business. They became my business when you decided to target my wife. They became everyone's business when you turned sexual harassment into a management strategy. I never harassed anyone. Then explain the pattern. Explain why every woman who's worked under you has either slept with you or been transferred to a different department. Explain why your divorce settlement included a morality clause. Explain why your own company suspended you pending investigation. He looked around wildly, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The live stream was still running, the viewer count climbing past 20,000. His reputation, what remained of it, was disintegrating in real time. Fine, he said finally. You want the truth? Here's the truth. I used my position to sleep with employees. I made promises I couldn't keep to get what I wanted. I manipulated women who trusted me, and I destroyed their careers when they became inconvenient. I'm exactly the kind of predator your wife was stupid enough to fall for. He turned to Jenna, his face twisted with contempt. And you were so desperate to escape your pathetic marriage that you convinced yourself I actually cared about you. You weren't special, Jenna. You were just available. She recoiled as if he'd struck her, and I felt a surge of protective anger that surprised me. Whatever she'd done to me, she didn't deserve to be humiliated by a man who'd used her desperation against her. That's enough, I said. Is it? Because I thought you wanted the truth. The truth is that your wife is a social climbing witch who threw away 20 years of marriage for a job that didn't exist. The truth is that you're a loser who couldn't keep his woman satisfied. The truth is that none of this would have happened if you'd been man enough to give her what she needed. The words hit me like physical blows, triggering the same rage that had sent me into Colby's office with my fists months earlier. But this time, I was ready for it. This time, I had control. Silas, I said quietly. My brother stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Yeah? Would you mind escorting Mr. Lennox outside? I think he's done sharing. What happened next was quick and brutal. Colby tried to run, but there was nowhere to go in the abandoned factory. Silas caught him near the loading dock and brought him down with a tackle that would have made our high school football coach proud. The fight lasted maybe 10 seconds. Colby threw a wild punch that missed by a foot. Silas responded with a combination that left Colby on the ground, his nose bleeding and his expensive suit torn. That's for calling my sister-in-law a whore, Silas said, standing over him. And this is for being a general piece of crap? He kicked Colby in the ribs, hard enough to hurt, but not hard enough to cause permanent damage. Colby curled into a ball, whimpering. Get up, I said. You wanted to leave. Now's your chance. He struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose, and stumbled toward the exit. At the doorway, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is, I replied. And everyone watching knows exactly how it ended. After Colby left, the factory fell silent except for the hum of generators powering my makeshift broadcast equipment. Jenna stood in the pool of artificial light, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Is that really what you think of me? She asked. That I'm a social climbing whore? I think you're someone who made terrible choices for understandable reasons. There's a difference. But you still hate me. I considered the question, surprised to find that the answer wasn't what I'd expected. I hate what you did. I hate the way you did it. I hate that you threw away something real for something that was never going to last. But you, I'm not sure I have the energy to hate you anymore. She nodded, wiping tears from her face. What happens now? Now you go home, you rebuild your life. You try to become someone better than the person you were. And us? There is no us. There hasn't been for months. She looked like she wanted to argue, to make some final plea for reconciliation. But the words never came. Instead, she walked to where I stood and reached into her purse. Here, she said, holding out her wedding ring. I should have given this back a long time ago. I took the ring, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. 20 years of marriage reduced to a circle of gold that had cost me 2 months' salary when we were young and optimistic about the future. I'm going to ask you one more time, she said. Can you ever forgive me? I don't know, maybe someday, but not today. She nodded and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. At the doorway, she paused. For what it's worth, you were a good husband, better than I deserved. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my former life and 23,000 strangers watching through their computer screens. I picked up the tablet and looked at the stream of comments flowing past. Most were supportive, calling me a hero for exposing Colby's behavior and standing up for myself. Others were critical, saying I'd gone too far, that revenge was never justified. All of them were missing the point. This was never about revenge, I said to the camera. This was about accountability. For too long, people like Colby Lennox have used their power to hurt others without consequences. Tonight, there were consequences. I paused, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the humiliation, the months of careful planning and execution. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel was absent, replaced by something that might have been peace. My wife made choices that destroyed our marriage. My boss made choices that destroyed my career. They thought those choices wouldn't matter because they were dealing with someone powerless, someone who would just accept what happened and move on. The viewer count had passed 30,000, comments streaming by too fast to read. I was going viral again, but this time it was on my terms. They were wrong. Everyone who thinks they can use and discard people without consequences is wrong. Sometimes the hammer swings back. I reached over and shut off the live stream, cutting the connection to the outside world. The factory fell into darkness as I switched off the generators, leaving only the distant glow of streetlights filtering through broken windows. Silas appeared beside me, materializing from the shadows like he'd been waiting for his cue. So that's it? It's over? It's over. How do you feel? I considered the question as we walked toward the exit, our footsteps the only sound in the abandoned building. How did I feel? Not triumphant? Not satisfied? Not vindicated? Empty, maybe. Like something that had been burning inside me for months had finally burned out, leaving behind a space that would need to be filled with something else. Different, I said finally. We reached the parking lot where our vehicles waited under the pale glow of security lights. In the distance, the city sprawled out like a circuit board, thousands of lives intersecting and separating in patterns too complex to predict. What now? Silas asked. Now I figure out what comes next. Any ideas? I looked back at the factory one last time, at the building where I'd spent 20 years of my life building things that mattered. The company was gone, the jobs were gone, the life I'd planned was gone, but I was still here. I'll think of something, I said. We drove away in opposite directions, leaving the abandoned factory to its ghosts and silence. Behind us, the city hummed with activity, people working late shifts, couples fighting and making up, children being born and old people dying, the eternal cycle of human drama playing out in countless variations. Somewhere in that maze of lights, Jenna was driving back to her apartment, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had collapsed around her. Somewhere else, Colby was cleaning blood from his face and wondering if his career could survive another scandal. I didn't feel sorry for either of them, but I didn't feel satisfied by their suffering either. They'd made their choices, and now they'd live with the consequences. That was justice enough. The next morning, I woke up in my empty house and made coffee for one. The live stream had been viewed over 200,000 times during the night, spawning dozens of reaction videos and news articles. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from local media, but I ignored them all. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was just noise. 3 weeks later, I sold the house and most of the furniture, keeping only what I could fit in a truck. The proceeds, combined with the rental property income I'd neglected for years, gave me enough money to start over somewhere else. I chose Portland, Oregon, partly for its climate and partly because it was far enough from home that I wouldn't accidentally run into anyone from my old life. I found a small apartment near the waterfront and a job at a fabrication shop that specialized in custom metalwork. The work was satisfying in a way my old job hadn't been. Instead of maintaining other people's machinery, I was creating things, artistic pieces, architectural elements, functional sculptures that would outlast the people who commissioned them. 6 months later, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. No return address, but I recognized Jenna's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences. I found a job in Seattle. HR assistant at a nonprofit. I'm trying to be better. I read it twice, then filed it away in a drawer I rarely opened. Good for her. Everyone deserved a chance to be better than their worst moments, even people who'd hurt you. A year after that, I saw Colby's name in a news article about a sexual harassment lawsuit. 3 former employees were suing Lennox Solutions for creating a hostile work environment. The article mentioned that Colby had been terminated and was facing personal bankruptcy after his ex-wife's successful alimony lawsuit. I felt nothing reading it. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sense of poetic justice. His destruction was the natural consequence of his choices, like water flowing downhill. I'd simply removed the obstacles that had been protecting him from gravity. 2 years after leaving, I met someone new. Sarah. A potter who sold her work at weekend markets and taught art classes to kids with learning disabilities. She was nothing like Jenna, quiet where Jenna had been ambitious, gentle where Jenna had been sharp, content with small pleasures where Jenna had always wanted more. I told her about my past during our 3rd date, the whole story from beginning to end. She listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and ultimately decided that who I'd been mattered less than who I was becoming. We married on a beach in Oregon, a small ceremony with a handful of friends and no family except Silas, who served as my best man and cried through the entire service. Sarah's vows mentioned second chances and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what came before. I thought about Jenna that day, wondered if she'd found her own second chance in Seattle. I hoped she had. Not because I'd forgiven her, I wasn't sure I ever would, but because carrying hatred was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. The story that had started with betrayal and ended with revenge was finished. What came next was entirely up to me. Standing on that beach with Sarah's hand in mine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: optimism about the future. The hammer had swung back, delivering the justice I'd demanded. Now it was time to build something new.